The smell came first. Not smoke from burning buildings, but something heavier. Sweet. Rotting. Wrong. April 1945. Central Germany. American soldiers stood frozen at the gates of a place that was never supposed to exist. The wind carried ash-like dust across the road. The sky hung low and grey, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Just hours earlier, this had been a routine advance. Another town. Another surrender. Now, hardened combat veterans were vomiting in the dirt. Inside the barbed wire, thousands of bodies lay stacked like debris after a catastrophe. Some moved. Most did not. And then an order was given. An order that no one expected. An order that would force an entire civilian population to confront what had been hidden in plain sight. Scientists were not prepared for what happened next. By April 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing in slow motion. Allied forces were pushing east at unprecedented speed. Entire German units surrendered without firing a shot. Towns raised white flags before tanks even appeared on the horizon. In the American sector, General George S. Patton's Third Army tore through Thuringia, a region of rolling forests, medieval towns, and quiet farming villages. It was here, near the city of Weimar, that U.S. troops encountered something different. Something that didn't match intelligence reports. The first signs were subtle. Locals avoided certain roads. Rail spurs disappeared into wooded hills and were never discussed. Villagers spoke nervously, using euphemisms instead of names. American intelligence officers noted inconsistencies. Freight trains arriving full, leaving empty. Fuel and food allocations far beyond civilian needs. Construction projects guarded by the SS until the very last days of the war. One officer later wrote, "The data didn't fit any military facility, something was being concealed." But nothing prepared them for what they found on April 11, 1945. Behind electrified fences and watchtowers sat Buchenwald concentration camp. More than 21,000 prisoners remained. Alive inside starving, diseased skeletal. Over 30,000 had already died there. American medics, trained for battlefield trauma, were overwhelmed. Typhus, dysentery, tuberculosis, men weighing less than 80 pounds. Piles of corpses stacked like cordwood. Colonel James P. Holland described the scene bluntly. It looked like the aftermath of a massive natural disaster, except it was engineered. This was not collateral damage. This was design. The civilian question. Weimar sat less than 5 miles away. A city of poets and philosophers. Cafe schools. Churches. And the same question echoed among American command. How much did they know? German civilians claimed ignorance. They said they had heard rumors but nothing concrete. They said the smoke was from factories. The trains were for labor relocation, the fences were for prisoners of war. But intelligence officers weren't convinced. This wasn't just about documenting a crime. It was about accountability. And that's when a decision was made. On April 16, 1945, American military command issued a directive. Not to enemy soldiers. Not to SS officers. But to German civilians. Specifically German women. Many were wives of Nazi party members. Some were clerks, teachers, shopkeepers. Others were refugees or widows. They were rounded up under armed guard. No explanation given. Witnesses described confusion spreading through the crowd like a pressure wave. Why only women? Why now? Military police trucks began moving slowly, deliberately toward Buchenwald. This was not an evacuation. This was a confrontation. As the trucks climbed the hill, the smell intensified. Some women covered their mouths with scarves. Others laughed nervously, convinced this was a form of humiliation or forced labor. Then the gates came into view. Barbed wire. Watchtowers. Crematoria chimneys still warm. The laughter stopped. When the gates opened, silence fell. The women were ordered to walk. Inside, survivors watched from their bunks too weak to stand. American soldiers formed a perimeter. Then the reality hit. Women screamed. Some fainted instantly. Others collapsed to their knees. One U.S. soldier recalled. They reacted the same way we had. Shock. Disbelief. Physical revulsion. Bodies lay everywhere. Not buried. Not hidden. The women were forced past. The execution yard. The gallows. The medical blocks where human experimentation had taken place. At the crematorium, soldiers stopped the group. The ovens were opened. Ash spilled onto the floor. Then the orders continued. They were told to carry bodies, to bury the dead, to clean the barracks. Some refused. American officers did not raise their voices. They simply pointed. Then something unexpected happened. The women began to understand. This was not punishment. This was exposure. Within U.S. command, debate erupted. Some officers argued this was collective. Punishment illegal. Under the Geneva Conventions. Others disagreed. General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself had already ordered. Everything must be documented. The German people must see what was done in their name. This was psychological warfare, but also historical preservation. Photographs were taken. Civilians were filmed walking through camps. The logic was clear. Denial thrives in distance. Reality collapses denial. Historians later described this moment as a moral inflection point. No model had predicted this scenario. The idea that civilian confrontation, not tribunals alone, would shape post-war memory. This changed everything. The true impact didn't happen that day. It happened weeks later. As women returned to Weimar, stories spread. Not rumors, details. Descriptions of rooms. The smell. The faces. Denial fractured. Some still refused to believe. Others broke down publicly. Local Nazi officials disappeared. Suicides increased. For the first time, the barrier between us and them collapsed. The camps were no longer abstract. They were local, human, irrefutable. American psychological analysts later concluded. The forced exposure of civilians to concentration camps reduced post-war denial more effectively than any trial transcript. This was the second shockwave. Not physical, but irreversible. Buchenwald became a crime scene. Journalists arrived. Doctors documented starvation protocols. Survivors gave testimony. Airports across Germany closed temporarily as photographic evidence was flown to Allied capitals. Entire towns were placed under administrative control. For the women who had been marched through the camp, life never returned to normal. Some became witnesses in later trials. Others refused to speak again ever. One woman later wrote, "I went in believing nothing. I came out knowing too much. The order given that day was not written in law books. It wasn't delivered by judges. It came from soldiers who had seen what secrecy creates and understood what exposure destroys." Buchenwald was liberated in hours, but denial took generations to dismantle. Even today, historians warn, this is not over. Archives are still being opened. Mass graves are still being found. And memory, like pressure beneath the surface, demands release. Because when truth is buried, it doesn't disappear. It waits.